They kept walking across my lawn like it was a public thoroughfare. Every day, every hour, families, dog walkers, board members, even the mail carrier took a shortcut right over my prized turf. I planted that grass myself, tended those flower beds for months, and every morning when I walked outside, there were new divots and footprints and the smell of someone else's cigarette ash on my roses. I asked politely at first, "Please use the sidewalk," I'd say, and they'd smile and step around with an air like it was no big deal. I put up a small sign, "Please keep to the sidewalk," and it vanished within 2 days. I emailed the HOA and got the usual, "Will address community concerns," bland reply that never addressed mine. I spoke to the president. She listened and then the next week sent a dozen residents over as if to prove a point. The more I asked, the more cavalier they became, as if the yard belonged to everyone but me. It was maddening, but I didn't want to fight. I wanted my lawn back. So I did the thing people don't expect. I engineered a surprise that was legal, harmless, and impossible to ignore. I spent the next month planning, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted respect for my space. I mapped the tracks people used, checked property lines, and photographed every trampling so I had a record. I called the city planning office and confirmed every piece of private versus public right-of-way. I talked to a local sculptor about a temporary installation, and I ordered materials that would transform the route into something visitors would have to acknowledge rather than stroll through. On a Tuesday night, while the neighborhood slept, my plan went up. I didn't block access or do anything illegal. I built an experience that made people notice they were crossing someone's lawn. In the front yard, where the walk was most worn, I installed a row of waist-high planter boxes filled with tall, ornamental grasses and bright perennials. The boxes weren't permanent and were anchored only lightly to the ground. They took an hour each to place and looked like a deliberate artistic border. I placed decorative stepping stones in a gentle arc that traced a proper path from the sidewalk to the gate, with a tasteful wooden signpost that read, "Please use path, private garden." I mounted a low rustic fence of interlocking cedar slats along the perimeter. Not a barricade, just a visible edge that said this was cultivated space meant to be respected. For finishing touches, I hung a string of solar lanterns that glowed softly at night and set out two comfortable chairs by the porch to suggest this was a lived-in personal area, not a shortcut. The effect was immediate. The next morning, a small crowd gathered across the street. People lingered, snapping photos and murmuring about how pretty the yard looked. It was like someone had placed a polite but very clear, invisible, "Do not disturb" sign in plain sight. The planter boxes and ornamental grasses invited people to look but not trample. Children who used to run through the middle now stopped to admire the stonework. Neighbors who once barged in to walk their dogs glided politely along the proper sidewalk route. The change was aesthetic, not confrontational, but it did something important. It reframed the space from public shortcut to private garden. It made people see. Of course, Karen noticed. She is the sort of person who notices everything and takes it personally. The HOA president arrived at my gate that morning, arms folded, trying to summon offense at the sight of my tasteful landscaping. "What is this?" she demanded. "You can't just block access across the green." I invited her onto my porch and handed her a cup of coffee, because losing your cool in front of people only escalates things. "I'm not blocking access," I said. "I put in a boundary and a path. The sidewalk is right there. If folks want the shortest route, they can use public walkways. If they want to stroll through a private garden, ask politely. That's how gardens are treated." She huffed about community standards and open sightlines, and then asked to see the permits. I had them ready. The city didn't require a permit for short decorative planters or a low boundary fence. I showed her the property maps I'd confirmed, pointed out the public right-of-way, and explained that everything I'd installed was on my land, within code, and installed to protect my plants from daily trampling. She rattled off the familiar HOA jargon about complaints and community aesthetic, but her words had lost force. People were watching. Some neighbors approached and told her how much they liked the garden. An older couple said they'd stop by because the stepping stones were lovely and the flowers brightened their walk. Suddenly, Karen's tirade sounded petty. Then, to ensure there was no misinterpretation, I added something else. A small plaque near the path that read, Community gardens respect private,